Okay, welcome back. Last week, I talked a bit about House of the Dragon here. Talked about how it's not woke, even though maybe outwardly some people think it is. Talked about... I did a review of the season. I did a review of last week's episode, the season premiere, Heirs of the Dragon. And I'm going to keep making these recaps. Recap/reviews. I don't like to call them just straight up recaps because I like to insert my opinion, not just say what happened. So it's a review. This week was not quite as exciting as last week's, or as violent, or as sort of big. I mean, last week was a premiere, so we had these huge things. We had this crazy tournament that got very violent. We had the death of the queen and the birth of the heir for a day. We had the banishment of Matt Smith's character, Daemon Targaryen, and the elevation of Rhaenyra, played by Millie Alcock, to the heir apparent. So she is a female heir to the Iron Throne, which is basically unheard of within the history of the Targaryens at this point. But it is actually a reflection of our own world. Once again, Henry I, he had the tragic white ship accident where his heir was drowned to death, and so the succession to the throne was between his daughter Matilda and his nephew Stephen. And so this is sort of a parallel to that story, or just to the idea of like a succession in a sort of, the Plantagenets had a very long dynasty. Targaryens had a long running dynasty, but often fraught with issues of succession, often fraught with civil war and conflict between siblings or between cousins, aunts, uncles, whatever. Like English history, this is a patriarchal society where most of the rulers are kings. However, just like in our history, there were many powerful women. Certainly in the history of the English crown, there were many women who had a lot of influence, who had a lot of pull, who maybe fought for their own sons to become king. And so this is kind of where we're at. We're looking at this kind of particular moment in history where there's no male heir at this point. The queen is dead. King Viserys the First, played by Paddy Considine, he has elevated his daughter against the advice of plenty of others. Meanwhile, his the hand of the king, Otto Hightower, has sent his daughter Alicent to sort of start flirting with the king. She is Rhaenyra's friend, and she goes to the king and basically starts talking with him in a very empathetic way about the loss of his wife and this sort of giant sculpture of old Valyria that he's building with his stonemasons. And one thing leads to another, and their relationship gets deeper and deeper. This, of course, is obviously a plot from the Hand to elevate his daughter to the queen and hopefully see some of his heirs eventually make it to the Iron Throne. Meanwhile, we have Lord Corlys and Queen and Princess Rhaenys, who are from the Lord and Lady of Driftmark. They approach Viserys as well and offer him their daughter's hand in marriage. They say that these two old Valyrian houses, they're the Velaryons. This gets a little confusing, but the Velaryons and the Targaryens are both old Valyrian houses, and if they united in an alliance bound by marriage, the king and their daughter, who's only 12, by the way, that would create, a powerful alliance between these two houses, which, it is very sensible. And when King Viserys asks one of his advisors, one of the members of the small council, Lord Strong of Harrenhal, what he should do, he says, you should totally marry this girl, this Velaryon girl, and unite your houses, because that's a smart move. You unite the wealthiest house, the Driftmark, House of Driftmark, the Driftmark throne, the Lord of Tides, the Sea Snake. You unite his house with your house. You get the best of all worlds. You continue your reign of peace and stability, and hopefully produce some more heirs in the process. Well, not all goes as planned. In the end, Viserys is fully ensnared by Alicent's charms and announces that he's going to be marrying her, which upsets a lot of people. It upsets Lord Corlys, obviously, since he was pretty sure that this was a good idea to have his daughter and the king get married. It upsets Rhaenyra because she is completely taken off guard. Now, Viserys, I always say those differently, that word differently. Anyways, he and Rhaenyra had finally sort of come to bond again, to get closer after the death of her mother and his wife. They had a period of not really speaking with one another, except for sort of formally and officially. And at this point, they started to mend their relationship. And then he sort of threw this surprise grenade into the mix by revealing that he's going to be marrying her good friend, and she had no idea they'd even been talking. So obviously she's not going to be too happy about this because it seems like a pretty big betrayal. And she was pretty certain also that he was going to, hook up with this little 12-year-old girl from House Velaryon. Although, as the girl pointed out, her mom, Princess Rhaenys, had said she doesn't have to bed him until she's older. But in this case, Viserys, who rules very gently and likes to be loved, chooses love over pragmatism, and the results are going to be felt throughout every other episode of this show, because this is a big deal. So Lord Corlys is pissed off, and he storms off. Rhaenyra is pissed off, she storms off. But Hightower, he's very pleased, and Alicent is as well. Although one wonders how much she really... it seems like she does have affection for the king, but also is being a useful pawn. Other stuff that goes on. At one point, Matt Smith's character, Daemon Targaryen, off-screen, steals a dragon egg from the Red Keep and is going to apparently give it to his concubine. And it was the egg that was supposed to be for Rhaenyra's little brother, who died, the little baby who died. So this is an affront to the king, an affront to Rhaenyra. Everyone's upset. Otto Hightower and Kristen Cole, the new Knights Guard, who actually in this episode Rhaenyra chooses. He was the one who won the victory at the tournament last week. She chooses him because he has real battle experience to be part of the King's Guard. Sorry, not the Knights Guard, the King's Guard, because one of the older members of that perished. So he goes with Hightower and some troops, and they go to Dragonstone, where Daemon and the Gold Cloaks have holed up, sort of against, not with permission. He's just gone there and sort of taken the fortress and had now taken the egg. They show up. There's a tense sort of meeting between these two groups, and at one point Hightower mentions, like, are you really going to be this stubborn even if it means the death of your woman and her unborn child? And then everyone draws swords, and there's this like big fight, but then Syraxis, Daemon's dragon, shows up, and like everyone gets pretty nervous, and Hightower tells them to put their swords away. And then Rhaenyra shows up on her dragon, Syrax, and she flies down and walks over, and her uncle talk for a bit. There's definitely some tension between these two, but she basically makes him realize that he's kind of being stupid, and he tosses her the egg, and all that's diffused, which, her dad's not happy about her going there and doing all this without permission, but ultimately she did kind of show her mettle, and he can't really be too upset. So by the end of the episode, Viserys has sort of alienated Lord Corlys and his own daughter. He has brought the Hightowers much closer into his confidence. He's going to be remarried to Rhaenyra's best friend. Corlys goes off and has a meeting at Driftmark with Daemon, who they sort of discuss how they're both kind of being overshadowed by the throne, by the king. They're Corlys describes them as the second sons of Westeros. And he suggests that Daemon come and help him fight this triarchy and this crab feeder guy, these guys that have sort of taken up, they sort of occupied the Stepstones area, which is these series of islands in the narrow sea that's kind of a choke point for the shipping lanes from the east to the west. So they've been killing sailors and looting ships, and they're a real threat to the economic stability of Westeros. But the king isn't going to do anything about it. He doesn't want to start any sort of war with the Free Cities. He's just going to ignore that it's even happening, because this is kind of how he rules. He doesn't want to deal with big problems. He doesn't necessarily do the pragmatic thing. He's not a very good king. And in fact, there's one great line in this conversation where Corlys says something about the king, and Daemon replies, "Well, it was never his strong suit." And Corlys says, "What wasn't?" And he says, "Being king." So Daemon obviously does not approve of how his brother rules. Daemon wants to rule in a more traditional, fiery, strong, show of force, better to be feared than loved sort of way, whereas Viserys wants to be loved. So there's obviously sort of a little alliance brewing between Corlys and Daemon. Rhaenyra has been sort of thrown off her feet, because even though her father has told her that he's never replacing her as heir, now he's got a nice young new bride who he can start having babies with right away. There's no waiting needed like there might have been with the Velaryon girl. So I can't think of her name off the top of my head. She's just a young child at this point. So yeah, things have moved along quickly, and I've seen 6 episodes so far, and I will tell you this. Between episode 5 and 6, there's a time jump of like 10 years, but throughout each episode there are smaller time jumps. This moves much bigger steps between episodes than Game of Thrones, which was a much more immediate show. So this, as far as episodes go, I think, last week's was more exciting. This is a little bit more slow. This is, again, just sort of like the way this show moves is a lot of sort of, it's the court intrigue that we saw some of in Game of Thrones, but in that show, of course, like, things happen quickly. Robert Baratheon is dead before you know it, and everything starts to move really fast. After Catelyn takes Tyrion prisoner, and then Jaime freaks out, the king dies, Robert's brother Renly says you need to go and arrest Cersei and Joffrey, but Ned doesn't. Renly bails. Ned is betrayed by Littlefinger. It all happens very quickly, and it's all very it's sort of an action-packed sort of court intrigue, whereas this, it happens kind of, it's a little less urgent. The real intrigue is Hightower getting Alicent to go sort of seduce the king, and the king falling for it, and sort of, it's just a slap in the face of his daughter and one of his allies. And even like Daemon's betrayal, stealing the egg, this happens off screen, and then there's, a tense confrontation, but nothing really happens. Nobody's killed. There's no fighting. This is something, at least in the first part of this show, that you just have to kind of get ready for. There isn't much action. There isn't a lot of this sort of like, holy shit, red wedding moments. And of course, this is just I've seen 6 episodes, so a little more than half of the season. Things might get a lot crazier. We'll see. But this is setting the stage, and there's going to be a lot of stage setting and a lot of sort of figuring out who these people are, their relationships with each other, and it just moves. Even though we're moving ahead in the time jumps a lot more, the show itself moves a little bit more slowly. Now, maybe that'll be something you like. Maybe you'll get impatient. We'll see. Let's see what next week brings. For now, I enjoyed it. I really enjoy the world that they've created with this show. Even though it is slower, even though it is a little bit less immediate and gripping. And even though I still have not really started to care about any of these characters very much. I like Rhaenyra. I like, even though he's kind of bad, I like Daemon. Sometimes it's good to be bad, right? And I like Viserys, even though he is a terrible king, clearly. But I don't love, I'm not like, oh man, I'm not rooting for anyone yet. I don't have like Arya Stark and Jon Snow and all those guys to root for yet, so we'll see. I'm enjoying it. I hope you're enjoying it, but so far, it has not grabbed me quite as strongly as Game of Thrones. Now, maybe it'll be the opposite of Game of Thrones, where it starts a little slower and then pulls us all in, and by the end, we're like, holy crap, that was an amazing show. Let's hope it ends well, at least, right? All right. Thank you for watching. See you soon. See you next week for sure. Peace.